not thinking about this direction, but it's a great choice. It doesn't get an exclamation point, but I think it deserves one.
I am really enjoying the fighting chess that we're seeing these young guys play against each other. So this is Nodirbek Abdusatorov, young prodigy from Uzbekistan, and this is Ramesh Babu Pragnananda, another young prodigy from India. Now they're still playing in this tournament. It's day 2. This is the rapid encounter in round 4, and you're in for a great attacking move from Pragg. Plus, look out here for these themes in the game. So opening lines and wrestling for the initiative. So instructive how both players try to do these things. So we get an English. G3, copycat variation from Pragg. I mean, I made up that name, but he's copying right. Now we see D5. So Pragg, the first one to take the center there. And after knight C3, we see a weird looking move, but the most common. So we don't see captures here, or after pawn captures, you've got the half open file to work with in combination with the bishop. That's nice for white. And if you go E6, well then you've got some development problems. So how do you deal with the attack? Well, knight C7 is the main theoretical move. Yes, you concede some ground, but that knight is going on a nice circuit. You know, it has got ways to re-enter the game in future. So this knight now develops, knight C6. We get castles and E5 from Pragg. So white has given the center, but A3 starts the process of chipping away at it from afar. Now here, the queenside play is where Abdusatorov wants to focus. He wants to rip open lines, as we'll see. Pragg does similar with rook to B8. Also comes off this long diagonal, which can be dangerous. So we get rook B1, bishop E7, and now this is a great move of pawn to B4. Not wasting any more time preparing that move, you know, with knight E1, C2, or anything like that. Just playing it through, and after captures, pawn captures, well, that pawn is actually immune. So if you capture with the knight, well, you do leave the protection of this pawn, but even more than that, there's an immediate tactical shot with rook takes, bishop recaptures, and queen a4 check. Classic idea when you haven't castled the king. And equally, if you take with the bishop, you've still got problems because of knight takes here. You know, this time you can't do this and this and this because the knight retreats. Doesn't work. But what you can do is take the pawn as mentioned, and after knight recaptures, you pick up the bishop. And if black tries to get clever and say, aha, well, I'm going to chuck in this in-betweener, well, white then chucks in an in-betweener that's way more powerful because you're hitting the queen. So pawn captures, rook takes, and here white is an exchange up. So this pawn on b4 immune. So instead, we see pawn b5 from Pragg. Important move, stopping white from pushing on and gaining more space, dislodging this knight. And now bishop b2 from Abdusatorov carries on the rapid development. He knows this pawn can now be taken. Why is it not captured this time by the bishop? Well, again, it's just all about initiative. Knight e4 comes. Say you castle. Well, then there's queen c2. Hitting this one. Now also this pawn is hit. You know, this one's open since the knight moved away. Big initiative for white. You're going to win back a pawn plus some. So that's why we don't see b4 captured. Pragg goes castles. Now knight e4 anyway. This pawn attacked twice. Top computer move is f6 to defend. Again, it's not played. Why? Well, now there's d4. And again, don't want to go crazy deep on these lines, but something like this, queen b3 check, and it's just really good for white. All the lines are open. All the pieces are flooding out. Black's not yet fully developed. You know, good position for white, especially when you win back one of the pawns. So instead, Pragg develops his bishop. Now this pawn drops, and here Pragg takes on b4, restoring the material, and we have a really interesting imbalance where black has got these two outside passed pawns, but white has got a lot of central play to balance it off. So we see pawn d4 taking central space, also adding to the control of c5. Knight e6 starts to remaneuver, fight for the c5 square, also looks at d4, e3 covers, and now pawn a5 gets those passed pawns rolling. We see bishop a3, very important move. you have to open this rook, start pressuring here, try and stop the advance of those pawns. And after bishop a8, opening up the defense of this rook, we now see queen e2, adding some pressure, and Pragg just walks into this, retreats his knight to c6, allows this pawn to drop. But it wasn't played by Nodirbek. Now, why did he not do this? Well, there's an awesome tactic here for black. Can you pause and find this one? What's the winning shot here that means the pawn is immune? So the move you can play here is knight takes on d4. You can go with either of those knights. And because you're forking these two, pawn recaptures, knight takes, well, you've still got a real problem. Because after the queen moves, say queen d3, well, now the knight can recapture, and you've simply won an exchange there. What's the best way? Sorry, rook takes is best, the computer says. But here, black is completely winning. So coming back, you can't win the pawn. Complicated game, I know. And now we see more tactics flying. You can take here first, then do this tactic. But what we see in the game is Nodirbek doing this one immediately. Check, bishop recaptures, and now he doesn't take this rook. I don't want to keep going down every sideline, right? But basically, if you take the rook, then when the dust clears, the computer says that these pawns are too strong, or you have to give back an exchange. So what we see instead is knight takes on c6, bishop recaptures, and bishop takes on c6. Allows b4, shutting out this attack on the rook. This bishop retreats, but look at the bishop pair now for Nodirbek, and importantly, this light squared bishop covers some key blockading squares of those pawns, and the knight hasn't got access to c5. So white a tiny bit better. Queen d6, according to the engine anyway, anything can happen in practice. So the bishop attacked, rook defends. Now it's attacked again and it retreats back to a4. Wonderful defensive piece, swinging round those unopposed squares. We get queen d5, looking at the light squares, challenging this piece. And now h4 is played. There could have been ideas of knight g5 there, eyeing these weak light squares. Now we get g6 from Pragg, preparing to tuck back his bishop. That's what we now see. And here, Nodirbek just plays slightly imprecisely, but it's tough. The computer wants to go queen a6, but then you have to think about these invasions with queen a2, hitting two bishops. Gets complicated, gets tactical, so Nodirbek goes for something more practical. Rook c2, covers one of his loose pieces, loose pieces drop off. Now we see h5 from Pragg, and the second rook doubles. So it forces action on the c-file. Nodirbek takes the c-file, looking good for him, but b3, lovely interrupter. Here hitting the queen, asking it a question, and it should go to c4 immediately. Because now, if captures, well, rook recaptures, you're doing okay. And if you slide away, like we see in the game, well, now with the queen pressuring the pawn, you can immediately capture with the bishop. White's doing quite well. But we see queen c6. And now after queen f5, there's no bishop captures here. So what do you do about the invasion of the queen? Potentially, well, the king covers the square now, and this is where we see the awesome attacking move played by Pragg. Now, I'm not going to show you it on the board here. I'll play you the clip, but if you want to try and guess it, do pause and have a think.
Whoa!
Not thinking about this direction, but it's a great choice. It doesn't get an exclamation point, but I think it deserves one, because if white takes on g5 and this knight captures back, there's the h3 square with check, the f3 square if your queen is distracted, and I think that black is more likely to win this type of position than white would be.
So g5 on the board, awesome attacking idea, very low on time, ripping open that king, and it's a horrible move to face. So queen f3 was played, coming back, trying to defend, trying to exchange queens. We see Pragg not allowing it with queen to g6. Now we get captures, knight takes, queen d5, good defense so far from Nodirbek. But now after pawn h4, he has such a difficult defensive challenge. Now the most practical try perhaps was queen c6, bishop c6, adding defense to this diagonal. But what the computer wants to do is this captures, which just looks so unhuman-like, opening this G file, but apparently the king can duck back and there's no knockout blow, not quite enough attacking pieces for black, but it looks suicidal. So what does he do instead? Well, he takes on b3 with the bishop, going for this counterplay against f7, but now look at this. Lines have been opened for the rook. The initiative firmly on Pragg's side. Imagine a pawn now coming to a4, the bishop has to move and this one drops off. But first, Pragg flicks in, takes on g3, and this is where Nodirbek burns tons of time because he's in a world of trouble, right? What to do? One of these pieces is dropping off. You can try bishop c2, counter-attacking the queen, but there's this long line, you know, even when you try and then save this piece, well then if you do that like this, you get mated in two. And if instead you play rook h1 first, hit the queen, now it comes to e2, you know, very long lines. I don't want to bore you all to tears, right? But black emerges in the driver's seat, you know, completely winning game. So instead of trying to go for bishop c2, we see f3 from Nodirbek, keeping these lines closed here, but now pawn a4, hitting that bishop. Where's it going? Well, f4 is now played. I mean, you could have done that in one move, right? But okay, it's still lost for white here with best play. So we see rook takes on b3. Now the knight drops, but this one drops with check. King takes on g3, and now great move by Pragg, really composed, doesn't start trying to hunt this white king. He goes bishop to f6, just looking to pick up this pawn, crushing position to follow. So rook c5 covers that pawn. Now we see king g7. The bishop immune, by the way, because of this pin here on the pawn to the king. So king f4 breaks the pin. But now check, the king back. The rook ducks away, hits this pawn. The king covers, also breaks the pin, threat to take the bishop, so we get some repeat. Now rook f1 played, king g2, and rook b1 slides away. Still the pawn is pinned. King f2 unpins, but now we see a lateral check. King g3, you can't step to the back rank, by the way, or then you simply get mated. So you do have to keep stepping up the board. Now pawn a3, that one running, king f4, and this time after rook f2 check, king g3, pawn a2, we do not get a repeat of the position because this is the awesomeness of this one. If the king captures, that one's going through to make a queen. So instead, what do we see? Rook a5, forced, coming behind the pawn, but now beautiful finish from Pragg. He nudges back this rook to f5, overloading all of the pieces. You know, if the queen takes, well, now you take here with check. The king's not long for this world. And if, as in the game, you take this rook, well, now after captures, you just can't stop both of these threats, you know, everything going on. So we see takes, and now this one doesn't even yet make a queen. Pragg flicks in, takes on d4, the most precise move. He's doing this on 10 seconds increment, and after captures, we get a new queen. Rook d5, king g6, these were now the final moves. The king given the runaround, slowly Pragg wins a pawn and gets his own one running. And of course this is just overwhelming, you know, queen versus rook plus pawns. This was then the final position. So I hope you enjoyed that really complex tactical game. Thanks very much for watching. Do check out the video on screen if you want to see another epic game of chess, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.